Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. Today I'm going to be talking about the episode from Season 3, The First Day, when John Boy has his first day at college. If you're enjoying these, please do like and subscribe. Comments have been made about the fact that the Waltons really only had one bathroom for 11 people living in the house. We didn't see the bathroom a lot, but in this case, there is an example of all of the children trying to get ready for school at the same time and sharing this one tiny bathroom. So that happened in a couple of episodes, but here is one of those times. Because John Boy is about to head off to college, he is sort of trying to pass the baton to Jason to be sort of the supervisor of the younger children. And he sort of challenges Jason to step up into that leadership position when Ben and Jim Bob start scuffling about being in the bathroom and Ben teasing Jim Bob. And so Jason tries unsuccessfully in the beginning of the episode to be John Boy and to come down on the rest of us and tell us and try and, sort of dictate to us in the same way that John Boy sometimes did. John Boy, from as early as the homecoming, was tasked with our mama saying, well, you're the oldest, make them behave. So John Boy sort of challenges Jason in the same way. In this episode, Professor Ghote is played by actor Lawrence Dobkin. Larry Dobkin was a wonderful actor. I loved the way he could play drama with a sense of humor and have a sort of ironic play on what he was doing. So although he was being tough, there was also, you could see the compassion and the understanding behind that. So just lovely, lovely work. Larry Dobkin directed a number of episodes of The Waltons, and I always loved working with him as a director. He was one of my favorite directors on The Waltons. Being a freshman, John Boy and the other freshmen are teased mercilessly by the upperclassmen, by those who are no longer freshmen and have been through it themselves and now think it is very funny to turn around and give the new freshmen a hard time. They make them wear these beanies and they trick John Boy into delivering this goat, this mascot, to Professor Ghote, who recognizes the position that John Boy has been put in and actually does not come down on him as hard as he could. But this episode very much raises that whole issue of peer pressure and the way in which John Boy tries to work around that. He tries to make peace and yet not be subjected to this. His fellow classmate Ted finds the path of just being cool, being above it. So sort of trying to outsmart the others. And he tries to advise John Boy, and John Boy's not inclined to pretend to be someone he's not. So he finds his own path forward, which works for him. And I think it's something that each of us has to do when we're put in that position. School is notorious for us experiencing that sort of peer pressure, or trying to be on the side that is inflicting the peer pressure on others. But how many of us have found ourselves going along with something that we really didn't want to because of peer pressure? I hope it wasn't something you experienced, but I certainly know I did. My attention was caught by this scene around the kitchen table, which appears to be lunchtime. And it's just Olivia and John and Grandma and Grandpa, and they say grace at lunchtime and then have what looks like corned beef hash and salad. Interesting on both counts, but I thought it was sweet. John Boy has had his car towed off of campus or out of the parking place because he inadvertently parked in the faculty parking because the sign was blocked by banners. And he needs to get his admission certificate, which he left at home. So he calls Ike and asks Ike to run over to the house and ask John to drive his certificate over to the school before the deadline. Here, Ike jumps on a bike. So I guess this was before we have introduced his motorcycle, So fun to see Ike on a bike. My character is going through the ennui of deciding that everything in life is boring. She thinks it's wonderful that John Boy gets to go off to college because there will be so many new, interesting things. And for Mary Ellen, everything is boring. You know, the same old boring subjects, the same old boring faces. Everything is the same. And fortunately, there's a new boy in class, so that raises her interest level a little bit. At the beginning of seasons, and sometimes once for several seasons, a series of vehicles would be taken up to our local locations, Fraser Park, and they would get a series of different, what we called stock shots of the various different vehicles driving along the country roads that they could use. In this case, you see John Boy's car going along this road, and then you also see John's truck going along this road. Those would have been driven at that point by somebody in the transportation department. That was not John. It was not John Boy actually driving, but you cannot see that because of how long a shot it is. So that's what they would do sort of as what we would call a second unit production, where they would shoot without the actual actors, and somebody else, an assistant director or somebody, would go and direct those scenes to get those various different shots. They would do the same thing with, you know, stock shots of the mountains and things like that, so that they had these scenes to cut to when they needed them. I was surprised when I saw this scene where the classmates of John Boy's, who think they're oh so cool, make fun of John and his truck when he arrives to deliver this certificate to John Boy, and they're making fun of him. And John Boy proudly goes over to his father. I always think of Jon Walton as someone to admire. He's such a great example and such an admirable person and character that I was like, wow, it was so odd to me to think that anyone would sort of make fun of him, because he so exemplified the best of what one would hope to encounter in another man. As we're in season 3 now, I was caught in looking at this scene at how close in height Mary was getting to me when we started in the homecoming. She was several inches shorter than me, and within another season from here, she would have passed me in height. She's, a good 2-3 inches taller than I am in real life. So here I was like, wow, she's getting close, because we're in season 3. Shooting on the back lot of Warner Brothers Studios had its challenges. We were in the flight path of the Burbank airport, so we were constantly having to deal with airplanes going over the studio. Plus, we were right in the middle of the city. So there were times where there were streets, like right on the other side of where we were shooting. And in fact, this spot here, just like outside the barn by where the clotheslines were, on the other side of that was actually streets, city streets. So we did not have control of what the people who lived on those streets might be doing. And I seem to recall hearing at one point that, I know there were certainly days when the garbage trucks came by. So we would be dealing with the sound of garbage trucks picking up the local garbage. And then also, I think there were neighbors who got sort of crafty to the fact that we were trying to film there, and they would intentionally make noise. And I believe I heard something about production assistants going over and, dropping the guy at 20 so that he would turn his lawnmower off. I don't remember if that's true. Also, there was a little hill that you sometimes saw behind the studio. And we would have off-road vehicles, motorcycles, things like that, dirt bikes that would decide to play on some of those hills. And again, we had no control over that sound, so we would pretty much just have to wait and try and catch our scenes between the noise, or just deal with it and hope that they could clear a lot of it out in post-production. Sort of like the sound of this lawnmower around where I live that is doing its weekly lawn mowing. It always seems like when I sit down to record videos for you, the lawnmower starts up. So we're just going to deal with it today, because this is the window of time I have to share with you. With her first child off to college, Olivia finds herself at odds around the house and missing him even though the children are always away at school, but somehow this oldest son leaving the nest to take that step, one step closer to leaving the house altogether is weighing on her. And Grandma tries to advise her, but Olivia's solution is she decides to make applesauce cake because it's John Boy's favorite. Miss Hunter takes a moment to advise Jason because she notices that perhaps he is stepping out of who he really is and trying to, in some way, be someone he's not, and feels that he's probably feeling those shoes of John Boy's and feeling that he needs to fulfill those now that John Boy is no longer around. And she sort of advises him to just be himself, which is such a wonderful message for all of us. And Jason takes that to heart and does stop trying to act like John Boy, but find his own path forward. And once again, a beautiful scene for Mary Claire Costello, who played Rosemary Hunter. That's what I have for you for this segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons about the episode The First Day. Please join me again for more episodes of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons and more Ask Judy. Thanks for watching.